A decade after the world fell, civilization is nothing but a memory. The land is a ruthless battleground where only the strongest endure. Humanity has splintered, and the remaining survivors have become ruthless, doing whatever it takes to stay alive. One day, Jake and his father head into the forest to hunt. They spot a wild boar, and Jake's father takes a shot with his bow. But when they reach the place where the wounded animal should be, it's gone. As they track its blood trail deeper into the woods, Jake's father notices something eerie, a small, dirt-covered children's boot lying on the grounds. A little further ahead, they come across an abandoned car. Cautiously, they search it for supplies. Jake finds a pack of cookies and, unable to resist, stuffs them into his pocket. Later, when his father isn't looking, he devours them in secret. But in his rush to cover his tracks, he accidentally leans against the steering wheel, honking the horn. The sound shatters the eerie silence. A dog barks in the distance, then another and another. Jake and his father freeze, hearts pounding. They scramble into the car just as a pack of wild dogs emerges from the shadows. The beasts circle the vehicle, sniffing hungrily. Minutes crawl by like hours. Then, without warning, the dogs lose interest and run off into the night. Exhausted, Jake leans against his father's shoulder and drifts into uneasy sleep. When they finally return to their hidden cabin, they are greeted by Jake's gravely ill wife, who depends on the dwindling supply of medicine they've managed to scavenge. That night, Jake's father steps outside, rolling a cigarette from the leftover tobacco he found. He inhales deeply, staring into the darkness. Something doesn't feel right. The next morning, Jake wakes early and steps outside to relieve himself. That's when he hears it, a rustling sound beyond the trees. His stomach clenches. Without a second thought, he bolts back inside. Through the cracks of their shelter, he sees them. Cannibals. A group of them, moving like shadows between the trees, approaching the cabin. Panic surges through Jake as he shakes his father awake. They move quickly, gathering whatever supplies they can. Jake's wife, frail and barely able to stand, clings to her husband as they slip out the back, hoping to escape unseen. But in the chaos, Jake drops his backpack, the one carrying the precious medicine his wife so desperately needs. They reach an old outhouse. There, Jake's father makes a gut-wrenching decision. He orders Jake and his wife to hide inside while he stays behind to buy them time. Jake protests, but his father is resolute. Then the cannibals arrive. Jake watches, helpless, through a crack in the door as his father fights like a man possessed, wounding several attackers before being overpowered. The last thing Jake sees before closing his eyes is his father's lifeless body hitting the ground. The cannibals ransack the cabin, taking whatever they can, including Jake's backpack. The leader, a cruel, monstrous figure, slings it over his shoulder before disappearing into the woods. Hours pass. Finally, when the coast is clear, Jake and his wife emerge from hiding. Inside the cabin, Jake finds the empty pill bottle, realization hitting him like a punch to the gut. The medicine is gone. His wife moans in pain, her body trembling. She won't last long without it. Jake kneels beside her, tears burning his eyes. In his desperation, he considers the unthinkable, ending her suffering with his own hands. But he can't do it. Instead, he makes a choice. He's going after the cannibals. Wearing only a t-shirt and underwear, he grabs a photograph of his father, locks up the cabin, and sets off. The freezing air bites into his skin, but he doesn't stop. He won't stop. Hours later, his body gives out near a river. When he wakes, he's not alone. A young boy stands nearby. When Jake reaches out, the child bolts, leading him to an abandoned house. Inside, an old man sits by a fire. Desperate, Jake forces his way in, takes the man's jacket, pants, and shoes, and disappears into the cold. He presses on until he finds it, a campfire surrounded by the bones of his father. His breath catches, grief clawing at his throat. He buries what little remains and then climbs a tree to scout the area. In the distance, smoke rises. The cannibals camp. Steeling himself, he moves in, avoiding traps. He finds his stolen backpack, but the medicine is missing. As he searches, he's ambushed. A brutal struggle ensues, and Jake barely manages to kill his attacker with a rock. Then the rest of them return. He hides as the leader hands the stolen medicine to an injured comrade and locks it inside a chest. Night falls. Jake sneaks into their shelter, careful not to wake them. He cuts the key from the leader's neck, but it slips through his fingers, clinking softly against the floor. He holds his breath, no one stirs. Slowly, he retrieves it, unlocks the chest, and grabs the pills. Before slipping away, he locks the trailer door, trapping the cannibals inside. But as he moves, his foot catches a tripwire. A bell jingles. The leader's eyes snap open. Jake runs. Arrows whistle past him as he flees. He reaches the boy's home, only to find the door hanging open. Inside, the old man lies dead, torn apart by wild dogs. Then a sharp pain, a blow to the head, darkness. Back at the cabin, Jake's wife grows weaker. The wild dogs, drawn by her scent, begin scratching at the door. Jake wakes, tied up in the cannibals' camp. His knife lies just out of reach. The leader sneers, tossing his father's photograph into the fire. Jake watches in silent rage, then he spots something. A whistle. With one desperate move, he grabs it and blows hard. The piercing sound cuts through the night, carrying far and wide. Moments later, growls echo through the darkness. The wild dogs have arrived. Panic erupts. The cannibals scatter. The leader, desperate to escape, shoves one of his own men into the beast's path. Amid the chaos, Jake fights. One by one, he takes them down, using their own weapons against them. Finally, it's just him and the leader. The battle is savage, both men bloodied and gasping. But then the dogs return. Jake staggers back, leaving the wounded leader to his fate. On his way home, he stumbles upon an abandoned house. Inside, supplies. Relief washes over him until he hears a sound, footsteps. The leader has survived. The final showdown is brutal. Jake finds a rifle, but it's unloaded. The leader lunges, pinning him, hands tightening around Jake's throat. In one last desperate move, Jake presses into the leader's open wound. The man recoils. Seizing his chance, Jake grabs a pistol and fires. One shot, right to the head. Finally, he returns to the cabin, but as he approaches, his heart stops. The door is wide open, the place is ransacked. He drops to his knees, despair crushing him. Then a hand on his shoulder, he turns, his wife is alive. After everything, after all the suffering, the loss, he made it back in time. Have you ever imagined what it would be like to survive in a post-apocalyptic world? What would you do in Jake's situation? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.